I'm a biochemist by training. When I graduated with my master's in cellular and molecular biology at the public university in my home country of Uruguay, I got a job at a teacher's training institute. At the time, I thought it would just be a way to get some income and support myself as I continued working on my PhD. So I showed up at this teacher training institute. It was a brand new institute, and I was supposed to teach biochemistry to these pre-service science teachers, K-12 science teachers. So the first day I was really excited. I know my stuff. I have all the books. I have all the transparencies. I just went there and delivered my lecture with great enthusiasm. And I told them everything about the Krebs cycle and glycolysis and lipid metabolism. This is what I got. So, these are not my real students, but this is pretty much the reaction that I got from my students. And I just couldn't figure it out. What was the problem? I mean, I had taught them exactly the way that my teachers at the university had taught me, and I had learned. I had been excited about biochemistry. I loved the subject, and I had done exactly the same as my teachers. There might be differences, but you know what I mean. So then it hit me. I had a great insight. I realized that I had learned not because of how I had been taught, but in spite of how I had been taught. And I said to myself, this is not good enough. I need to do something. The first thing that came to mind, my first instinct, was to start experimenting. So, for instance, I invited students. So, a few classes after that, I invited students to create a game to teach others metabolism. And the students really got into it. We spent lots of classes creating the game, creating the rules, studying the different principles, and so that the rules can be embedded in the principles. And they were really excited. You can see it in their faces. They love playing. And when I tested them, they actually, did pretty well. And they did the test that we were supposed to do. But what stands to me is that even years later, when I talk to some of these students, they remember the concepts, and they have a passion for the subject that was not there before. And some smart people have figured this out. This is Carl Wieman, a physics Nobel Prize that has dedicated many years lately to study how people learn, and how people learn in very traditional contexts like big lectures, right? And this is what he says, right? That when we measure what people learn from lectures, it's very little, right? That what they learn is from homework, from assignments, right? So, but then we hear we need to apply research-supported best practices to what we do, right? And so let's talk about research. So as I mentioned, I'm a biologist. So I spent many hours in the lab running experiments. And as I was doing this, and this is now I'm at Stanford, I'm doing my PhD in developmental biology in the Stanford School of Medicine. And one thing then I went to do research in education, but that's later on. So I spent many days and even nights in the lab doing experiments. And I remember a week when experiments were not going particularly well, and I stepped on the elevator to go home, and I found this flyer. It said, D.School Summer College, Adventures in Design Thinking, welcome graduate students from all disciplines who want to cross the boundaries between technology, business, and human values, and are open to exploring ways of thinking that empathize creativity, action, and prototyping. So let me tell you, I really didn't know what most of those words were, kind of like empathizing, prototyping, right? But this seemed like, kind of like a nice break from the lab, from my failed experiment. So I applied and I got in. And that was my first d.school class, and it really changed my life, right? I found that was the people, that was the place where I needed to be, because of what was taught there and how it was taught. That was what I really wanted to do. So we at the d.school, I've been creating experiments of all types, and here's one of my teaching teams for a creativity and innovation class. This is a day where we welcome the students wearing, pretending to be owners of a restaurant, and we had a menu of activities for them. And we have done many, many experiments, and I realized that all of those experiments were not at all different than the experiments that I would do in the lab, in the biology lab. So when we think about evidence from research, from the research as we understand in the hard research, of course that leads to best practices, right? And those best practices can be adopted or implemented. But I would say that there is a missing piece. And what is that missing piece? That missing piece is educators as designers who experiment in their practice, because those educators can take the research and make it their own and try it in the classroom, bring it down to the classroom and see how it works. So they can be provoked and inspired by research. But very importantly as well, they can provoke and inspire researchers to run different experiments. So there are different types of experiments, but they're equally important. So that role of educators as designers is incredibly important. So let me tell you a story that illustrates how this might look like, or one of the ways in which this shows up at the d.school. So this was 2014, and we got the teaching teams at the d.school, we got a email from Sarah Stein Greenberg, our executive director, and the email had this image, pop-up classes, and the email said, what's a pop-up class? A quintessential d.school experience. So team taught, multidisciplinary, design-based, learn by doing, but with a twist. It can be an unconventional time frame. It could be an intensive weekend workshop or a 6-session class over 2 weeks. New adventurous content you're trying to prototype and refine. It's a great opportunity to bring in new teaching team members and try out new partnerships. A new or strange mashup of disciplines, or just plain weirder than usual. So she basically was inviting us to experiment using these provocations, right? And get away from the rigidity of the formal academic calendar, which is very useful to coordinate classes, but doesn't allow for the types of experiments that get to new ideas, where you can start really thinking, well, I have an idea, but I don't know if it's a full course, right? I don't know if I should ask for like a course number and like a place in the curriculum. You're just trying something out. So I've done several pop-up classes since then. This is an example of one. So one time I bumped into a professor from the law school, and we figured out like, well, there's something there at the intersection of negotiation and design thinking. Let's try something out. And so we did as you can see, like 3 classes on on negotiation by design. It was 3 sessions in the evening. We attracted a bunch of students. Actually, we had like over 100 applicants. So we can like from the get-go, it's like there's something here. There's something interesting. There's desire from the students in exploring this topic. And we use that opportunity to actually prototype different tools. We prototype different frameworks with colleagues, with students. Here's David Johnson, my co-instructor, as part of the class with the students. And, a couple of years later, we have a 4th credit class. It's a 2-unit class where we have students from law, from business, from engineering, from other fields exploring the intersection of negotiation and design, and it has been very successful. So pop-up classes are in essence a test kitchen for the faculty and a buffet for students, right? So these are not for credit classes, totally non-mandatory, so students can opt in, and if they really want to spend a weekend or an evening taking a pop-up class is because they're really interested, and they can taste different small bites, let's say, before they commit to a 10-week experience, right? And you can learn more about them here. So again, going back to our framework, if we think about that component of educators as designers, they are that kind of experimentation really can then feed other type of experiments that can lead to best practices. But that foundation that happens early on and happens at the practitioner level is very important. So here's again the DJ board of pedagogical levers. And these are levers that can be used to frame those experiments. Just like a DJ plays with levers such as volume, pitch, rhythm to mash and mix up new music, you can use these pedagogical levers to design learning experiences.